Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, everybody, I have a very special episode for you today. I'm not sure if you realize or not, but I actually have another podcast that I co host with my friend, Dr. Kathy Groover, called the Fire and Earth Podcast. And in that, we talk about a lot of different topics. But every so often, there's an episode that we do on fire and earth that I think is very relevant for you to hear here on Jamming with Jason. And so this week is one of those times. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and roll that podcast that was previously shown on the Fire and Earth podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I am Kathy Groover, and we have a very special guest, as we often do for the show today. And before I introduce him, I just want to say how we met. So I'm on LinkedIn pretty frequently. And one day I got a DM, as I do from people all the time. And there's this guy who I don't know who said, "Hey, I have a new book." I get this all the time. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then I started to read it and I went, whoa, like this actually applies to, like, this is something I could really get into. And so I wrote back and said, yeah, I'll check it out. Let me know when it's out. And we had a brief thing back and forth. And the next thing you know, I ordered his book and I started reading it and it was really good. And it's so rare that I do that, but I tell that story because, people are like, I don't want to reach out and I don't want to bug people I don't know. Reach out. I mean, like, be kind about it and be cool about it, but you never know when it's going to be the exact right moment that message lands in someone's inbox. And that's how it was. So I'm excited. We've got the author of Sustain Your Game and a couple other books, Alan Stein Jr. So everybody, welcome. Woohoo! Thanks for being here, Alan.
Oh man, I'm so excited to be with you guys. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm very thankful that you returned my unsolicited DM.
The unsolicited DM, I did. So why don't you tell people who you are, how you got to where you are, and what you do?
So professionally speaking, I'm a former basketball performance coach, and I had an opportunity to spend 15 years working with many of the game's highest performing players, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and 5 years ago, I decided to make the very distinct pivot to leave the basketball training space and become a corporate keynote speaker and author. And I now translate the strategies and lessons and principles that I learned through the game, through these high performing players. And I show folks how to use the principles with the highest utility and show them how to apply those to their own lives and their own vocations. And I'm having an absolute blast doing it and really grateful for the opportunity to do what I do.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, Jason and I are both speakers as well. So I know the passion and the excitement that comes from being in front of a live audience. That's very cool. So what is your background in basketball then? Were you a basketball player?
I was. So actually basketball was my first identifiable passion. And I fell in love with the game at 5 years old. And wow. I'm so thankful that here 40 plus years later, basketball is still a major pillar of my life. And I say that with the utmost gratitude that I'm so thankful that I've been able to not only make a living, but build a life around something I've always been incredibly passionate about. And, when I was a middle school age player, a coach gave me a piece of advice that I still to this day consider the best advice I've ever been given. And he said, you need to find something you're passionate about, find something you're naturally pretty good at, and then find where those two things intersect. And wherever those things intersect, that's your strength zone. And the more time and effort you can invest in your strength zone, not only will you perform at a higher level, but you'll have a much higher sense of joy and fulfillment as well. And I've stayed true to that throughout my entire life. Now, that point of intersection has changed over time. As I've gotten older and had more life experience, I've uncovered new passions and I've developed new skills. But I've still managed to make my life and make my living in that strength zone. And yeah, as you mentioned, the first portion of that, first portion of my life was as a basketball player. And then when I realized that, when I was graduating college, I played at Elon University down in North Carolina, I realized that, when I was graduating from Elon, my formal playing days were over. That's when I decided to become a basketball performance coach, and then made the most current pivot and iteration, which is the keynote speaking and writing.
Well, it's interesting. I grew up loving basketball too. And I was, I'd play in my backyard and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't very good, but I loved it. And I was so excited because I kind of had my little growth spurt before everybody else did. So middle school, I was 5'9", and I'm like, yes, And then a year later, everybody else caught up and passed me. And that was kind of, yeah, your career went all the way through college. Mine kind of stopped in junior high at that
As
point.
they do.
Yeah, but it's fascinating. And I think it's always really interesting to talk to people like you that have worked with, these people that we idolize. I mean, those people you listed off at the beginning, I mean, some of the greatest athletes in the world, right? And what's so interesting is all of the things that they do that make themselves great at their sport are things that we can all kind of incorporate as well, right? Which I'm sure is kind of the basis of the book and a lot of the things that you speak and talk about too. So I'm excited to kind of dig in and learn more, because you don't have to be Kobe Bryant to be a peak performer and to actually get a lot out of life, right?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you went in that direction. I mean, when you're talking about playing a professional sport, obviously there is a physicality component, and you even mentioned the most prominent one in basketball usually is height. A certain level of height and athleticism. But that to play in the NBA, that's just kind of the ante to play a round of cards. When we talk about life in general in a more evergreen fashion, and we talk about business, we can remove the physicality component, because in order to have a very fulfilling life or be incredibly successful in business, it doesn't matter if you're 5'9" or 6'9", and it doesn't matter if you can jump on top of a curb or not. All that matters is that you can emulate these proven principles and strategies and disciplines that high performers use. And one of the things I was so amazed, having spent time with somebody like a Kobe Bryant, was he would spend a tremendous amount of time studying high performers in other industries. Kobe Bryant would study Tom Brady. He would study Beyonce. He would study Warren Buffett. He said these people are in the upper 0.1% of what they do in their chosen craft. What can I learn from them? What can I emulate and apply that to what it is that I do? And I've just tried to reverse engineer that and do the same thing and say, okay, what lessons and strategies and disciplines and routines and mindsets can I pull from elite basketball players and show folks how to apply those to what they're doing? And, as I've been uncovering that, it's amazing to me that there's a small handful of traits that basically unite all high performers. Whether you want to be an elite keynote speaker, you want to be an elite pianist, or you just want to be an elite mom or dad, these principles have such high utility that they apply everywhere in our lives.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because so often people look to their own industry to grow, and they don't think to look to the Starbucks guy or whoever started GE, or, they pigeonhole themselves into, well, I do concrete, so I'm only going to look to the concrete experts. The other thing that I love is you realized at college, the basketball career for you was over. So you took all that knowledge and you stayed in that field. And I think so often people have this, this idea from when they're a kid, I want to be a whatever. And when they realize they can't be that specific little thing, they don't think to branch out to what the rest of that industry could look like for them. I was a theater major. I swore I'd never get off stage. I went to Hollywood. I did the acting thing. And when I realized that wasn't going to work, I kind of went, oh shit, now what? Well, here I am. I'm still on stage. I'm still entertaining people. I'm still doing, it's a different outfit and sometimes a different accent, but I'm still doing that thing that I wanted to do as a kid. That was my dream. And I think people throw it away and forget there's maybe another iteration of what they actually dreamt about doing. So I love that you pivoted and you brought all that in. So those are the things I've taken away so far.
No, I'm glad that you shared that. That's really cool. And, I used to say when I would spend a lot of time traveling around speaking at youth basketball camps, I would always say this kind of tongue in cheek and with a smile. I would say, every single one of you can make it to the NBA. And then I'd pause for a second, and then I'd see very few of you will make it there as a player. But if your goal is to be in the NBA, think of how many different jobs are in the NBA, both on court and off court. I mean, anything from being the person that sells you the tickets to being a referee to even being an owner of a team one day. If your goal is to make a life around the sport of basketball, that is incredibly viable. And there are so many different avenues for you to do that. And I want you to pursue the playing portion of that for as long as you can and give it everything you've got. I mean, it's a very lofty dream, but just know that, as you said so insightfully, if for any reason that dream won't come to fruition, there's still other options for you to stay around the game. And I'm certainly proof of that. And then one other thing, and I would love your guys' feedback on this, since you're both professional speakers. There are two forms of spoken word that I choose to study religiously outside of the keynote speaking world. One is hip hop and the other is stand-up comedy.
Yes.
Other art forms that are, based solely on spoken word. And, it's probably obvious to you all right now that I'll never be a rapper and I'll most likely never be a stand-up comedian, but I can still draw from those crafts and those art forms. And I can improve my delivery and my presence and my rhythm and the way I can evoke imagery and the way I can articulate a certain point. So if all I do is study other keynote speakers, then I'll probably just be like other keynote speakers. Yeah. And we're all in an industry where we need to be able to kind of cut through the noise and show that we have something slightly different to offer. So for me, I'm always looking outside of my direct industry. I had a friend of mine, and one of his favorite quotes is, you can't see the picture if you're in the frame. So you have to kind of step outside to really be able to enjoy that artwork.
Yeah. And I love that you said my partner and I watch stand-up comedy all the time. We drive down to LA from Santa Barbara. We're seeing them live. Netflix is constantly going watching stand-up comedy. And I grew up in a very funny household. My dad was the funniest man I knew. His timing was impeccable. He always had a one-liner. If there was an opening and it could be the middle of a funeral, he's taking the opening. I mean, he was hilarious. And I inherited that and then mimicked that, right? Because I saw that people liked him because of his humor. So as a kid, I was always not trying to be funny. I wasn't the class clown, but if there was an opening, I took it. And so I'm constantly watching stand-up comedy, and my talks are hilarious because I go from, and I dance to hip hop. I don't think about looking at that to speak, but I'll just listen to the words.
Well, the way that they're able to string the language together and the imagery that they put into it. I mean, it's, I love Eminem. He's one of my, I love that dude, and the way that he's able to musically pull everything together, deliver the message with so few words, but yet also in a rhyming and a pattern, which again, from an emotional standpoint, that's what we need as humans. Right. And so, I love that you're talking about that you're doing that, because again, I mean, one of the hardest jobs in the world is a stand-up comic.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's hard enough to be an actor or be a professional athlete, but you're up on stage every night with people, potentially laughing at you, right? Not with you. And each night is totally different. And so there's a lot of skills and things that you can learn from that. But I wanted to kind of back up just a bit, because I loved what you tell those kids in the training camp, right? That a lot of times I think people, I heard you say you got to find something you're passionate about and that you're pretty good at, and then try to do that, right? And so much of us, and we're taught in this world, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer so you can earn some money, right? And so many of us give up that passion side of our life because we think, well, I can't make money doing that. There's no career in that. And I know, like from the military, I'd heard this stat before, it might be wrong, but there's something like 11 or 12 different people in the military for every one person on the front line, right? So we think about like a fighter pilot, and we think about, the Marine out there with the gun in the trenches, but there's all these other support people behind them as well that you bring that up. And it's I just went to LA Angels game the other night. Ohtani broke his strikeout record. It was great. Anyway, but as you said that too, I'm sitting there thinking about all of the people, taking the tickets when you park, and all the ushers and the food concessions people and everything else like that. And I think it's great. It's important for us to remember that just because something is your passion doesn't mean that you have to give it up. Right? Like, go to the NBA, go to the NBA.
Exactly. And, as we look at that kind of that intersection for the strength zone, a couple of things also come to mind. One, I want someone to know that if you have a very strong passion for something, but maybe you don't have a tremendous amount of natural talent in that area, that's something that can become a hobby. That's something that you can do in your leisure time. I'm not very musically inclined. So it's my own self-awareness that leads me to the conclusion that I'll never be in a rock band or a lead singer or anything like that. But if singing or playing an instrument was a passion of mine, I don't have to be world class at it. I can simply do that in my free time because it brings me joy, and it's something I'm enthusiastic about. So it's not always just about finding that intersection for you to pursue vocationally. This is also just to round out our lives doing things that we enjoy. Yeah. Now, however, if we look on the other side of it, if you are not passionate about something, but you have a natural talent towards it, that can be a slippery slope as well. And, two examples come to mind. Let's just say instead of you, hitting 5'9" when you were in middle school, you were 6'9", and you didn't like the sport of basketball, but your parents and everybody told you have to play basketball because you're tall, and you don't really enjoy it. It's easy to kind of get nudged in that direction. Or if both of your parents were physicians, but you don't have the same passion towards medicine or helping people in that regard, but they're saying, look, you need to be a doctor. Like, you're incredibly bright. You have all of the skill sets needed. You need to be a doctor. If that passion's not there, that's dangerous to pursue as well. So there's either side of that strength zone that I think are certainly worthy of talking about and worthy of pursuing when it's right.
Yeah, I have a great story from what you just said. I had a client, she came in, I started out as a massage therapist, which I'm really good at, and I had a passion for. So we hit that teeny little spot in the middle, right? I had a client there, and I was working on my PhD at the time. She was at UCSB as a psych student for psychology, PhD. And she said, oh, it must be so nice to be doing a PhD that you love. And I went, wait, like, why are you doing a PhD in psych if you don't like it? She goes, well, both my parents are doctors and they're really pushing me into this profession. She goes, I really don't like it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I said, it's such a hard program, especially to not like it. I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, what would you like to be doing? And she said, I really want to be a baker. And I went, oh. She goes, I love baking. I love serving people. It's such a passion of mine. And I said, well, have you ever worked in a bakery? She goes, no, I'm obsessed with the baking shows, and I've got all these cookbooks and I do it in my spare time. And I said, can I give you homework? And she goes, sure. And I said, we're about to come up on summer. I said, contact one of the bakeries in Santa Barbara, see if you can intern, see if you can work there a week, see if you can get in that field and make sure you're going to regret if you never try it. And she goes, oh my God, what a great idea. Months pass by, like 6 months pass by. She calls, makes another appointment. She's on the table. And I said, oh my God, hey, whatever happened with like you working in a bakery? And she goes, oh, I reached out and I found one and they let me intern for the summer. And I fucking hated every second of it. I'm so excited to be in psychology.
Wow.
She realized that baking was a passion, but she didn't want to make it a job. She
Absolutely.
wanted to make it what she did in her spare time. She actually ended up on a cooking show. She won some baking show. I mean, it was perfect, but she's now a psychologist and she's helping young ladies with eating disorders. I mean, it's like, had she not tried it, she would have wondered her entire life, maybe I should be a baker.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm the father of 3 kids. I have 12-year-old twin sons and a 10-year-old daughter. And funny enough, very similar to what you just shared, we were having dinner the other night, and I was telling them about all of the jobs that I had when I was in high school and college. And it was a pretty wide array of jobs. And I explained to them that checking off what you don't want to do is just as valuable as finding what you do want to do. In fact, checking off what you don't want to do leads you one step closer to what you do want to do. And, we had a good laugh at all of the jobs that I had that I tried and said, I will never do this again. But the only way that I knew that was by doing it. So those were incredibly valuable experiences. And I think the more we're willing to be open and try different things, the better off we'll be. And it'll get us closer to that intersection. Because if anyone listening to this right now is thinking, well, I don't know exactly what I'm very passionate about and very good at and what I want to pursue, there's nothing wrong with that. And age is also not necessarily a factor. I mean, this tends to be advice that I preach to young people a lot. But if you're in your mid 40s or 50s or 60s and you're not loving what you're doing at present and you're feeling burned out, there's nothing wrong with recalibrating and refocusing that lens and trying to figure out where that intersection for you is now at present. It's never too late.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and I love that because I work with a lot of people that are in their midlife, right? And there's a lot of people that I find, most of the people that are burned out, that are hating life, they're usually in some vocation that they're not passionate about. It was one of those where it's like, well, mom and dad were doctors, so I've got to be a doctor, but I fucking hate doing it. It's like, well, how much longer are you going to keep hating your life, before you try some other things? Because like you said, there's so many different ways that we can earn money. And if you're making great money, but you hate your life and, you're depressed all the time, is the money worth it at that point? Or is it time to start trying to recalibrate? And like you said, find something else, find that strength zone where you can make a move.
Well, and what you have to do is you have to recalibrate your core values and what your North Star is, where that becomes a slippery slope. If you over prioritize money and material things and external validation, then you're swimming up current. I mean, it makes it really challenging to make that pivot. But if you say, hey, I'd rather make $70,000 a year and absolutely love my life than make $270,000 a year and loathe my life, you have to be willing to take control to make that trade. And that is difficult. I mean, I say all of this with not an ounce of judgment and with all the empathy and compassion I have in my heart, because the other game that I feel like we're encouraged to play, especially on social media, is the comparison game. And I can understand why someone would feel less than, saying, well, all of these people are making X amount of money and driving these cars and having these houses, and I don't have those things, so I must be less than. It takes tremendous self-belief and self-worth and self-confidence to rise above that and say, hey, that's fine if that's what they want. There's nothing wrong with those material items, but that's not what I'm going to prioritize. I'm going to prioritize my fulfillment, my enjoyment, and my pursuit of mastery in something that I love. That's what's most important. And it's been my experience that when you do that, the money ends up being a byproduct anyway. Obviously it would depend on the specific vocation, but I always believe that if you're really good at what you do and you do something that's of value and of service to other people, the money will find you. I mean, you don't have to go hunting for it, and you certainly don't need to sacrifice your happiness and fulfillment for it. It'll find you. And if it doesn't, you've already won, because you're doing something you love. That's something I have to constantly remind myself, generally speaking, and I hope this is taken with the humility at which it's presented. I've already won. I'm healthy. I have 3 amazing kids that I love very much. I do work that I consider meaningful and contributes to others. I at least have enough financial means that I'm not, I'm not out on the street. I have a roof over my head, and for that, I'm very thankful. So the rest is just extra. Like, I've already won the game. I'm doing something I love with the people that I care about. So when I don't get that speaking engagement, I might be down in the dumps for a couple of hours, but it's not that big a deal because I've already won. If my book doesn't sell 1 million copies and Oprah Winfrey never calls me, it's okay. I've already won. And to me, it's important to have that perspective. And I say already won through the lens of gratitude. It's not about keeping score or measuring external, things. It's just simply saying, I should be very thankful that I've got a good life doing something I enjoy with people I love.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought up values, to back up a little bit, because Jason and I talk about that all the time. And, I have clients who have moved to a part of California that is not great. It's kind of a poopy area, but they can get a gigantic house. I want 5 bedrooms. They can't do that in Santa Barbara. So their value is a gigantic home. They're the ones with everything that matches in their Instagram photos, and they're constantly having the best food, and that's their value. Sure. I don't want a gigantic house, or I'd be living in South Dakota or something. It's not a value for me. And I think when we're true to our values, that helps. That's why we do it. It guides us, right? And I was thinking, Jason, back to our talk with Mike Pashota, who gave up a 6-figure real estate career to be a magician. He left the fiance. He moved to California to be near the Magic Castle, and now he's our resident. I'm on the board there. He's now our resident magician. Yep. Talk about the risk. And I, thinking back to stand-up comics and, taking that chance to do things, it's all also about risk taking, right? You have to step into that sort of discomfort sometimes and take that risk to get what you want, to have that success. I have 8 books. They have not sold millions of copies, but they're published. They're mine. I get to share them with people and help people grow and learn. And that's a huge win. That's a huge success to me, even if it never makes me $1 million. So I'm with you.
Well, and I was going to say, because maybe we can, I want to ask you some questions about this, because you work with these high performers, right? And just like what Kathy was talking about, I mean, sometimes you got to put in the work, right? I mean, thinking of one stand-up comic that I know that she's on the trajectory right now, but she was effectively living in her car at different points in her career, right? I mean, you gotta put in the work, you gotta do the things. Sometimes, to get what you really want, you have to put in the work. So maybe kind of talk a little bit about that, because I know, again, working with elite athletes and other people, we sit there and think, oh, Kobe, he was just naturally gifted. No, the dude worked, and all these other people that you were, Steph and everybody else that you were talking about. These are people that show up, they put in the work. What are some of these kind of traits that these people have that we can all start incorporating as well? Because especially social media, Instagram, blah 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 blah, everybody thinks, oh, I think it, and boom, kind of thing. And that ain't how it works.
No, definitely not. And those players you mentioned absolutely put in the work. I mean, and the term we use is the unseen hours. For a basketball player, the unseen hours are when no one's in the arena, the cameras aren't rolling, and the cheerleaders aren't dancing. They're just in a gym by themselves working on their craft. And I think the average fan would be blown away to know how many hours a guy like Kobe Bryant or Steph Curry has put in when no one was watching. So yeah, the work is absolutely a key component, and you can't be successful without it. But what makes that work palpable and palatable is the fact that they loved what they were doing. I don't know that Kobe or Steph would be able to log the same number of hours in a different vocation that they did not enjoy doing. So the part of that sustainability is finding something that you love, which is the same reason that an aspiring stand-up comedian is willing to live out of their car, because they're pursuing something they enjoy. The thrill they get to do a 5-minute open mic set, is what keeps them going and makes it worth it, makes the writing sessions of writing a new joke and trying that material out and switching up, the punchline or the timing. It's the mastery of that craft that keeps them drawn in. But to answer your question, yeah, there are definitely a handful of traits that unite all high performers in basketball or business or anything in between. And these are the types of traits that I recommend everyone try to emulate in a way that's very authentic and genuine to you and your life and your situation. The first, and I learned this directly from Kobe Bryant in 2007, when he said his secret was that the best never get bored with the basics. And this kind of is what we were talking about. He said that, working towards mastery of the fundamentals every single day is what will lay the foundation to which the rest of your house is built. And the beautiful part is, it doesn't mean you need to be working on the basics 10 hours a day. 15 to 20 minutes every single day done consistently over time adds up to a massive return. So what I tell folks, in basketball, your basics are your footwork and your shooting mechanics. Whatever vocation you're in, ask yourself, what are the handful of basics or fundamentals that are required to have mastery of this craft? And how can I work towards those every single day? So the first is never getting bored with the basics. The second trait that unites all high performers is they do a masterful job of blending confidence with humility. They've earned the right to be confident because they've put in this work during the unseen hours, but they brush that with massive humility, which is what allows them to stay open to feedback, stay open to coaching, and what reminds them that no matter how good they are, they can still get better. I mean, Stephen Curry is considered by most experts to be the greatest shooter to ever play the game of basketball. And he doesn't rest on that because he knows he still has a small gap where he can improve. He doesn't say, I'm better than everybody else, so now I can just chill out. He says, I might be better than everyone else, but I'm not as good as I can be. So I'll be in the gym tomorrow morning working on my craft, working on those basics. So those are two traits that jump out immediately. And then the last that I've noticed is they're willing to commit to the process. They may be driven by a goal, winning an NBA championship or scoring a certain number of points or, hitting a quarterly sales goal in your business. They might have that goal, but once they have the goal, they put their sights on the process, on the daily behaviors, on the habits, the routines, the micro skills needed to achieve that goal. So they don't spend a whole lot of time sitting around wishing, wanting, hoping, dreaming. They put most of their time in saying, what can I do today that takes me just a couple of inches closer to reaching that goal? And if I can string enough days together, then it's not if I'm going to hit my goal, it's a matter of when. And that's their mindset. So they learn to detach from outcomes and focus on the process. So those are the three traits that jump out immediately.
I love it. I love it. And I'm glad you shared those because, of course, we could talk all day and we're out of time. So, okay, Jason, I know you're aching to ask more questions.
Well, it was, again, as I usually talk about ways of being with my clients, but things like being committed to the process, well, you gotta have commitment, right? You got to be committed. That's a way of being, sort of thing. But I think it's interesting because, like you said, there's clues all around us, and I love that story about Kobe looking to, these other people outside of his industry to learn as well, because, that's what I suggest people do. I mean, a lot of the great inventions or new business models or other stuff that are created have nothing to do with that particular industry, right? It was somebody in that industry that got inspired or saw something from somewhere else. But I think also too that, what you just brought up, and I just want to highlight because some people might have missed over it, is I think sometimes when we're trying to perform, we're trying to improve, we think like we have to be on the basketball court 12 hours a day. And this whole idea of it's the little incremental things, it's being committed to showing up or doing some of the basics for 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day, right? Which again, it still baffles me that, I say this to people and they just don't get it, right? It's like they think, well, I'm going to go to this 40-hour training and then I'm going to do nothing for like the next 6 months. Are you fucking kidding me? It's like, that'd be like a basketball player, going in and I'm going to work really hard this week and then I'm just going to coast the rest of the season. It doesn't work that way, but it's those little incremental things. And if we just do those little things every day, then like you said, those 10 to 15 minutes a day adds up to a lot, right? So that it's doable for everybody. I guess this is what I was trying to get back to. So it's... Yeah.
So well said. The analogy I always use is if you're ever tasked with building a brick wall, don't focus on the wall, just focus on laying each and every brick with care and precision. Yeah. And think about that. If every morning you wake up and you lay a few bricks as carefully and as precisely as you possibly can, and you do that consistently, within a couple of weeks or a couple of months, the wall will take care of itself. All you have to do is focus on laying those bricks to the best of your ability. And that's that brick by brick mentality is something I do, the best I can to live, to lead my life. And it's certainly what I try to model for others.
Yeah. Well, it's something people say, oh my gosh, how'd you write books? I could never write a whole book. And I said, well, I didn't sit down and write a whole book. I sat down and wrote a couple words that formed a sentence. And then that was a paragraph. And then I had a chapter and then I had a book. I mean, it's like, people get so daunted by, oh my God, I can't do this whole thing. It's Jason, I say all the time, how do you eat an elephant? One forkful at a time, Sorry, we could talk all day. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Sustain Your Game is a new book. This is your second. You have one before this, right?
I did. Yeah. Raise Your Game came out in 2019. And the Raise Your Game was to show folks how to reach optimal performance. Sustain Your Game is to show folks how to stay there and have a high sense of fulfillment as well.
Yay. Well, I'm about a third of the way through and I'm loving it. So it's my bedside read. So it's on my side, Sustain Your Game. So Alan Stein Jr., how can everybody reach you? How can they find the book?
They can go to alansteinjr.com, or I also have a supplemental website, strongerteam.com, that has info. I do a little bit of coaching. I've got a podcast, the info on the books. I've got a course. And then I'm very easily found and accessible on social media at Alan Stein Jr., Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. And certainly if you're interested in either book, you can go on Amazon or Audible or wherever you choose to buy books. They're very easily found. And this was so much fun. I really enjoyed this conversation. You guys are awesome.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad we connected on LinkedIn. Hey, social media works, man. It's about building relationships. Mm-hmm. I'm Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygroover.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, raise your game, sustain your game this week, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. See ya.
See ya.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. The fact that you listened to this entire episode means you got value and others will too. Do me a favor and leave a 5-star review with comments and then share with others. You can also check out all of my videos on my YouTube channel and my website, jasonmefford.com. This podcast is primarily for education and commentary and does not represent professional advice. Views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.